All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Allison Ward, and I am an education consultant with Reading Horizons, and I support districts um, in Texas and Mississippi. And we're very thrilled to have you with us today. It is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, colleague, and my dear friend, Dr. Paul Black. Dr. Black brings over 2 decades of expertise as a nationally certified school psychologist, having worked extensively in both school-based and higher education settings. He's earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Utah and holds advanced degrees in human exceptionality and school psychology from Idaho State University. Over the past 20 years, Dr. Black has supported students, educators, and families through his deep understanding of educational psychology, literacy, and the integration of technology in learning. He's also served as an adjunct professor and is a sought-after speaker at educational conferences across the country. His insights have been featured in leading education publications such as District Administration and eSchool News. Most recently, Dr. Black completed his doctoral studies at Loyola University Chicago, where his research focused on the critical impact of anxiety and depression on student academic performance, an issue that resonates deeply with educators and parents and basically everyone right now in today's world alike. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Black, and I'm going to let him take it from here.
And thank you, Allie. And I'm blushing. I appreciate the warm welcome. And it is good to be with you all. Again, I'm Dr. Black, and I'm passionate about literacy, and I'm going to explain why that's important to me. But we're going to talk about foundational literacy today. This is near and dear to my heart. You know, I've been working with students for over 20 years, and literacy is is something that vexes teachers, students, and educational systems. We see these bright young students that have average or above average cognitive abilities, but they struggle to read. And that struggle and how the system and how we as individuals react to that has an effect of deteriorating these students' self-worth, their self-esteem, how they feel about themselves, and that really gets in the way of student outcomes. For example, you know, the national average rate of high school graduation in Texas and Mississippi, we're looking at the mid to high 90 percentile rank. But if you have dyslexia, you're looking at 70%. And again, these students have the same or even better cognitive abilities as their peers. Their outcomes for wages, we're looking at, you know, making 20% less than their typical peers who are able to read. And again, this is all in spite of their cognitive ability. So that's why this is important to me, because literacy, we can literally change the world if we just teach people how to read. We know what the problem is. It's well defined. We know what the solutions are. We just have to implement it. So if you want to change the life of a student, teach them how to read. And you'll see that this has the power to break the school to prison pipeline. This has the power to break the cycles of poverty just through literacy. And that's why this is important for me. Now, the hard part is changing the system. We used to not know what went into reading. We had balanced literacy and, you know, a love for reading and all this and that. But then we discovered fMRIs, and we could, you know, scan the brain and actually literally see how the brain is wired for reading. Or to learn how to read. And what we found is that when it comes to language or sound, children are wired for it. But when it comes to print, which is relatively recent, if you look at the scope of human history, it's only been around for about 200 years. Evolutionary wise, our brains are not wired for print. And so it requires specific instruction if we are going to teach our students how to read. Now, about 80% of our students can adapt to reading and learn how to read using any kind of instruction. And 80% sounds pretty good. I focus on the 20% because that 20%, it costs more, it causes more trauma. It is, again, the outcomes are so difficult. So, what do those 20% need? And it turns out that the 20% need very specific reading instruction strategies and curriculums. But 100% of all students can learn to read the same way that those 20%. Okay, so that's why I am such a big fan of structured literacy, of Reading Horizons, because we can teach all students how to read. Now, we usually wait in the school systems until students are a little bit older before we start really addressing it. You'll see this is the fourth grade sum. This is the plateau area. Again, these cognitively intelligent students that are in kindergarten, first grade, they can fake it. There's 250,000 words in the English language, and we only give them a small sliver of that in kindergarten and first grade. Once we get into second grade, we transition from reading to learn how to read to reading to learn. And we start opening up the English language. We can no longer expect kids, and kids can't use those compensatory strategies to just memorize, the words that they need to memorize. They have to be able to decode. Well, those compensatory strategies really start running out around the third or fourth grade, and we plateau. You'll see if you're a special education teacher, you talk to your special education teachers in middle school or high school, you'll see that their students, on the whole, that have learning disabilities are still reading at that fourth, fifth grade level. Because again, they don't know how to decode automatically. The Matthew effect is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So what this plateau effect leads to is that our good readers continue to make progress in the curriculum, while the gap between our good readers and our poor readers broadens. So the overall academic achievement, and I would say the self-esteem, and I would say the emotional regulation, it changes for poor readers compared to good readers. And again, we can avoid all that. So in school, this translates into behavior. I would rather be respected than be seen as dumb. That is a phrase that I hear in not so many words from a lot of my students that struggle with reading. They act out. They want to escape the reading tasks, or they want to be seen as not somebody that can't read, but somebody that's choosing not to participate or is rebellious or whatnot. So when a teacher does present reading material, these students engage in problem behaviors. They want to act out. They remove the student or the academic task, and then the student escapes that task and their skills don't improve. And that cycle continues. Now, in Michigan, recently, they did a study that showed office referrals have an inverse relationship with reading ability, meaning as reading ability goes up, office referrals go down. So you want to improve the overall climate of your classroom, teach students how to read and teach them in the right way. And that's what we're going to do. So this involves the science of reading. Now, this has become a catchphrase for a lot of industry professionals where marketing teams, no offense, marketing, got a hold of this phrase and like, okay, we're going to have everything be the science of reading. That's not how it works, right? The science of reading leverages the neuroscience of the brain and how the brain functions when reading and translates that into instructional strategies. Okay, we are taking what we know about the brain and using it to our advantage and teaching in a very specific way. So when you have somebody that comes to you and says, well, we're based on the science of reading, ask them how. How do you leverage how the brain learns how to read neuropsychologically and translate that into instructional practices that are going to help me in my classroom and my kids? Okay, let me tell you what the science of reading is not. It's not just phonics. It's not balanced literacy where we just use context clues and try and develop just a love for reading. It's not just what is taught, but it is how it is taught. And it's not new. Orton Gillingham has been around from the 1920s, the 1930s. And we've taken a neurological approach to reading, or Orton Gillingham programs have taken a neurological approach to reading for decades and decades and decades. Um, it's when the it's when the fMRIs came out. It's when this brain scan technology came out that showed us how we learn how to read, that the science of reading really caught on, and that structured literacy and Orton Gillingham approaches really were validated and said, okay, this is going to work for us. The key elements of language have been identified as critical for successful readings. We know what the effective principles are, and we know that instruction that is designed based on the neuroscience of reading is what students need, and all students can learn how to read with. Now, another reason this is important is the simple view of reading. If reading comprehension or reading to gain meaning, which is the goal of learning to read, which is the goal of all reading, it should lead to comprehension. It is the product of decoding of text and language comprehension. Well, if your decoding of text is 0, but your language of comprehension is 1, your ability to comprehend what you're reading is still 0. I hear this from teachers all the time. I hear teachers tell me, well, they seem typical. When I talk to them, we have a conversation, or I tell them, or I even read it to them, or they see it, they've got it, but I have them read, they don't understand a thing that I'm trying to have them learn. And it's not because they're not trying. It's not because they're lazy. That's a common misconception. It's because all of their cognitive bandwidth is going into decoding text. There's nothing left over for them to understand what they're reading. And how this looks, you'll see students that just look at a page and just focus on it. Like if they just focus harder, they'll will themselves to understand what they're reading, and that's not the case. So we want to improve the decoding of text. We want to make it so automatic that it doesn't even feel like they're trying to decode. It just happens. That unlocks their language comprehension abilities and leads to greater understanding when it comes to reading. Now, we'll look at our dyslexia students. These deficits, the reason they can't decode text usually is in the form of a deficit in phonological processing. There comes a point, around the third, fourth grade where they have been exposed to the letters and the sounds so much that it doesn't really show on a test. But I can go all the way back to preschool and kindergarten. In fact, there are studies by Nadine Gabb that shows, I can look in the womb and see the brain development of a child prenatally and determine with some degree of accuracy whether or not they're going to struggle with reading. And it doesn't matter the language, right? That phonological processing is key to it. And so phonological processing should be an integral part of early childhood literacy instruction. We should start it in preschool. And if you're wondering, like, well, how do I know? Well, 50% of students that have a parent that struggled with reading, their children will struggle with reading themselves. So at a 50% rate. So if you have a student and you ask their parents, is there a family history of reading difficulties in your family? And they say yes, well, chances are that student is going to struggle with reading. And the interventions that you give them, whether or not they'll struggle or not, are still going to benefit that child. So it's best to pay particular attention to those students who have a family history of reading difficulties, and making sure it becomes a moot point if it's a critical or integrated part of the curriculum anyway, like it is at Reading Horizons. So that is why we know we can address it early. Okay, so the next thing you need to know about structured literacy is Scarborough's reading rope. This shows that if we're going to move to skilled reading, and this is a more in-depth version of the simple view of reading, it basically says we have phonological processing, decoding and spelling, sight recognition. We have these word decoding sections of reading, which is paired with language comprehension. And when you build those things together or intertwine those things together, you come up with skilled reading. Again, it is making the bottom part, this word recognition part, automatic so that language comprehension skills can take over and lead to skilled reading. So, excuse me. So, how do we teach reading based on the science of reading? What does it look like? Well, back in 2002, 2003, there was a national panel that was formed, National Reading Panel, and said these are the 5 components of effective instruction. And they build to each other. We start with phonemic awareness, we build to phonics and decoding. So, this is where we start blending sounds together. Then we want to do it fluently. Finally, we start building on vocabulary so that we can read to understand and gain meaning. Now, I would add motivation on the top of this too. We want to motivate students to be effective readers. It's important that students have exposure to success. Access to success is what I call it. If students don't have access to academic success, they're going to stop trying. And if they stop trying, they're getting fewer repetitions, and their progression to becoming a successful reader stalls out. It plateaus again around the 4th grade. So why we teach in this order is because I know if I am doing phonemic awareness, but my students, they can identify the sounds and they can identify the letters in isolation, but when I reach to decoding, they're not able to blend those together. That's where I can start working on my intervention. If I skip from phonemic awareness and go straight to fluency or vocabulary, then I'm missing the meat of where I need to intervene on behalf of that student. For example, my 4th grade students who have plateaued, and they come to the school psychologist and they say, hey, my student can't read, let alone understand what they're reading. We've been focusing on comprehension strategies. I'm like, no, that's not going to get us the mileage that we need. That's not going to rectify the situation. What we need to do is go back all the way to phonemic awareness and decoding and fill those gaps. And for older students, we can do that rather quickly. And once we do that, we can build the fluency. Then you can start adding vocabulary and comprehension. But there is no, Anita Archer says it best, there is no comprehension strategy effective enough that can compensate for the lack of fluent decoding skills. And that's true. Okay, so the 4-part processor of the brain, this is really what the neuroscience of reading is. We are going to leverage these pieces to work together as a team so that a student knows how to read. So we have the phonological processor. It's in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, by Wernicke's area of the brain. This is where dyslexics focus all of their cognitive bandwidth. It only wants to use this part of the brain to learn how to read. What we're doing when we teach in a very specific way is we're saying, no, you have to share this information, print with these other parts of the brain. You have to share it with the orthographic processor. That's where I can see it, the occipital lobe. You have to share it with the sound symbol part, the parietal lobe and the temporal lobe, which means meaning. We have to see the brain. And in fact, if you look to, in real time, a scan of a brain reading, you'll see a wave of electricity or activity start in the back of the brain and move its way forward in a moment, in an instant. The occipital lobe, the orthographic processor, sees the print. The phonological processor translates that print into sounds. The sound symbol, or the parietal lobe, takes that and puts those sounds into meaning, which then leads to comprehension. And again, this happens automatically without a moment's notice. I mean, it just boom, and it happens. And that is what we want our instruction to look like. Okay, we don't want to skip adding or involving those different parts of the brain. And this, I mean, we're literally wiring the brain for print for our young students. And I compare it to, I live in Utah. I've spent a lot of time in Texas, Mississippi. We have these beautiful meadows in Texas and Mississippi. When you approach a meadow, you have a lot of choices of where to go. If you want to just to get to the other side, you just walk to the other side. You get that path worn into the ground so that when you walk up, you don't even think about it. This is the path I get from A to B. So when there is a prompt, say there's a thunderstorm, or say that you need to get home very quickly and that meadow's in the way, you know exactly what route to take. That is what we're doing with reading. We are presenting the brain, which is our meadow, and saying these are the neural pathways that you need to take to be able to read. And we wear a path in the brain so that when a prompt comes, when they see a letter, or they hear a sound, they know exactly what to do with it. Now, again, 20% of our students aren't wired to have that naturally happen. So the instruction that we're giving them is connecting these parts of the brains and really getting a pathway, a neural pathway between these different parts of the brains so it happens automatically. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay. Oh, I missed the context processor. We have the four-part processor of the brain. I'm going to introduce a word. Okay. I'm going from speech to print. Now, Louisa Moats has done some phenomenal work with this. She authored letters training, but speech to print is key. I'm going to say a word or say a sound or say a phoneme, and they're going to hear it. And then I'm going to show them what that symbol, what that sound's symbol is, or how it's spelled. How do you spell that sound? Then I'm going to attach meaning to it. Now, the brain's not going to remember this kind of instruction unless it means something. If it's a nonsense word to them, they're just going to throw it out and say, I'm going to use my cognitive bandwidth for something else. So we always attach meaning to the words and the sounds that we're teaching. And from there, we put it into context, or else, again, the brain forgets it. We're reinforcing why the brain should remember it. So let me show you how that works. So phonologically, the word note. Say the word note. You can hear the different phonemes. Note, note. Okay, this is how you spell those sounds. N-O-T-E. Okay, a note is something that I use to play music, or I can even write a note down in class or to give to someone. For example, I left a note for my mom on the counter, and I might ask students, have you ever written a note? What kind of note would you leave for your mom on the counter while you're going somewhere, or you need something for something, or something or the other? That is how we leverage the four-part processor. That is embedded throughout all of my instruction that I'm giving to a student, especially a young student. So when you have curriculums that come and say we're based on the science of reading, this is your litmus test. This is how you say, okay, well, show me. Are you leveraging the four-part processor? Are you leveraging the neuroscience of reading? And this is how it looks. Okay, I'm going to take this one step further, because we're starting as an industry, as an educational system, to do a very good job of teaching decoding. Not always, but we're starting to get better and better at it. What we're not getting better is at spelling, because after I've used that four-part processor to go from speech to print, I want to reinforce that by going from print to speech. But too often we say, don't memorize the words, don't memorize the words, decode the words. But then we go to spelling and we say, memorize the words. Okay, we're missing a huge opportunity to reinforce everything that we're learning and decoding and reading by throwing it out the window and not leveraging writing and spelling. Now, this is something that I do with all my lessons. My spelling should be integrated with my reading curriculum. If I'm not, I'm wasting time, I'm wasting money, I'm wasting opportunities to get my students, especially that 20% that struggle with reading, I'm wasting my opportunity to get them on grade level if I'm not leveraging spelling time. Okay, so if I'm only doing 40 minutes of literacy block and then spelling's 20 minutes of something completely different, well, then I've missed out on a different 20 minutes of intervention for my students. Okay, so for example, why is cat spelled with a C but kitten with a K? Does anybody know that? This is just, one of those fun things with literacy, and this will show you how spelling ties in with it. Well, K takes the I and E, C takes the other three. So when I'm giving my spelling list to say my second graders or my first graders, and I say cat, let's break the word down. Cat. Is that spelled with a K or a C? Well, let's listen to the vowel that follows the hard K sound. Cat. Ah. What letter makes that ah sound as an apple? And that's me biting an apple. That's a physical prompt. They'll say A. Okay, so what takes the A, the K or the C? C takes A, O, and U. So I know that cat is spelled with a C and not a K. Now, what if I do kite? right? Kite. What's the second? What's the vowel in kite that follows the k sound? I. We know that's a long vowel. We can say that's I right away. K takes the I and E, right? So kite is spelled with a K. K-I-T-E. And I use the silent E because that proves the I long, right? So you can see how I'm going from, in my literacy block, speech to print. But then in my spelling block, I'm going from print to speech. I'm reinforcing everything that I taught in that decoding block. Think of it as a journey. I'm going from point A to point B, and then I'm saying, okay, we're going to turn around and we're going to go from point B to point A and reinforce everything that we just learned. I'm being twice as effective as a literacy teacher for my students. And that is how I think that is the foundational pieces that you need to bring into your classroom. Now, we could go on for hours, for days, for weeks about different practices and about different resources and about different specifics that you need in your literacy block. And I'd be happy to do that. If you want to reach out to me, Allie Ward is our account executive for, and she's a teacher too. And how lucky are you, Texas and Mississippi, to have somebody that's actually been in the classroom teaching struggling readers to be able to come to you and say, this is what we can do to help you. I'm a resource for her. Again, Dr. Paul Black, this is my specialty. I'd love to get into the more specifics with you about what you can do in your classroom, about what you can do in your individual literacy blocks, about what you can do with specifics like phonemic awareness, phonological processing, spelling, writing, and so on. So please reach out and let me know. Now, do we have any questions before we wrap up? I promised a 30-minute presentation. I know teachers are busy. Okay, no questions? All right, that's all I have, Alicia and Allison.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your expertise. And you will get a recording of this and you can share it out to your colleagues. And like Paul said, we're here to support you guys. So make sure that you reach out and let us know any way that we can do that. So have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all.